and welcome to Lydia with Lydia. This is a new video series that I am beginning about literature that I read, my reflections on it, and today I am reflecting on the book Confessions of a Sociopath. I heard about this book from an interview that I watched on YouTube, and needless to say, I was intrigued because the author was so like me in some ways, unlike me in some ways, like distressing to listen to. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I have to read that book. I'm so freaking curious about it. And so I did. These are my reflections. This, in no particular order, is a list of things that I wrote down as I was reading the book, and also after I finished reading the book and had like a week to reflect. These are my notes that I took. The first thing I wrote was, it's good she had God. And I think that this just comes from the fact that the author of this book talks about in her childhood how there was like a set of rules to obey and how she's always appreciated having God. And how she's always like wondered if she's going to hell. She was raised Mormon and she is a sociopath, so you can see where the conflicting emotions come from. I said she's so autistic in the way that she approaches friendships, and I think it's just because like she speaks in a way that is, she feels very outsider and very like calculating when it comes to approaching people, the way that you would approach like writing an essay or making a plan to get something done. She was very efficient and like conserving of her energy when it came to making friendships, and like even when she was talking about in her childhood, she was like this. It was always like a matter of like, I need something and you need something, and I'm gonna swap you what you need for what I need, but if ever there's a chance for me to stop giving you more than I have to, then I will do that. And so she doesn't like have like a natural inclination to bond with people. It doesn't come from like a warm, touchy-feely place. It comes from like an incredibly calculated place. And in some ways that is like autistic-like, but then like non-psychopathic autistic people are also pretty touchy-feely. They can be pretty touchy-feely when it comes to relationships as well. And I've noticed this especially in female autistic people, is like we frequently are like, we love people, but we just like have to take a measured approach to people because our emotions don't always line up with what other people's emotions are, if that makes sense. So the measured approach works better for us because we know like this person needs this, I need this, and I can connect with them if this. I am touchy-feely, warm, good, la happy about it, and it is because I want to fit in and I want to have friends, unlike psychopaths. But on the other hand, it is like we have to kind of have similar approaches, and we do feel like similarly outside of the realm of normal capacity to relate to other people. She has like this weird obsession with scams and library books and like just scams in general. Like when she says she heard about libraries, the idea of free books was like, she was like, this seems too good to be true, like what's the catch? Because she can't imagine like a world where people are just doing good for good's sake, where people are just like thinking up ways to provide for other people and then doing that. I think it's funny because she immediately tries to think of ways to scam the system to like take advantage of someone's goodness, and so she like steals all of her family's library cards and checks out as many books as possible, and then gets all these fines for having these books checked out. I do think it's funny that her immediate response, like in a guttural way, is like, how can I game this? She loves games. She plays games all the time with people. That's her only way of approaching people, is through games. Something that she says about herself is that she frequently just goes to where the money is, and I do think that this is interesting because like in a weird way, whenever I need to get something done, I'm capable of just thinking like in a very black and white sense, like what is the most effective way to get this done? like, what is the most effective, least time-consuming way to get this done? And she just says she just, like, goes to where money is, and she has, like, an entrepreneurial knack because she sees things so black and white. It's like, just do things the most effective way, like cross-benefit analysis. And she actually has ended up being really professionally successful in life because she just goes to where the money is, because she just goes to where is she most skilled and where can that skill most benefit her. It's just incredibly black and white thinking. Olive, she thinks a lot about religion because she is religious, and she talks about how, like, God made the devil. The devil was like, if God planned everything and God planned the devil, she looked at the world around her when she was in college and was like, thinking like, God made these people clueless and me not clueless. Hi. So cute. So God made these people clueless and these other people not clueless. The devil is here to tempt people, and God decided that that is what it is. And so am I also made by God? And how could I be a sinner if God meant to make me this way to, like, balance out good and evil? I thought that was a really interesting thought. I was like, I'm not religious, I don't believe in God, but, like, what a thought. And in my own way, I do kind of, like, grapple with this. Like, there are unethical ways to make money that would be easy. For example, drop shipping. It's just like selling a whole bunch of people a whole bunch of shit made in who knows where, and you don't even have to leave your room. Yeah, I could do that, and I could probably say, like, because the opportunity is there, I'm meant to take it. But then on the other hand, like, because I don't believe in God, and I don't believe God made the devil, I don't believe that, I mean, I do believe in some kind of God, but I don't believe in the type of God that's, like, out here making good and evil happen. I believe, like, it's a very complicated belief system, and it would take me forever to explain, but TLDR, I don't believe in the Christian God, and because of that, like, I don't believe that we can just behave in any way. I think that our conscience is God, in a way, like, the laws of society that are meant to be abided by, they're gonna come from us. And so if you just act in any way, then, like, you are actually capable of being evil. And that's what keeps me in check. Like, I don't want to drop ship a whole bunch of shit to a whole bunch of people from who knows where and who knows what they're getting paid for making it. That would just make me feel so guilty. She talks about this one time when she's reading her friend's journal, and she's doing it because she just likes this person and, like, really admires them and wants to know why and how are they like this. And so she starts to read this person's journal and she gets caught, and this person really doesn't like it. They're like, what the actual fuck are you doing? And they, like, tell all their friends, their shared friends, and then she kind of gets ostracized from this group. But what I thought was interesting was that her insight that she gained from reading this person's journal was that she actually is just like that, and, like, she's not pretending to be friendly, curious, gregarious, and all these types of things. Like, that actually is just her nature. And it's funny because she's, like, reading it trying to figure out, like, what is she getting from being like this? And the answer is, like, she doesn't. That's just who she is. To be honest, like, she's just acting the way that she is. Like, these are inborn traits. And in a weird way, I think that neurotypical people take it for granted a lot of the times, that it comes so naturally to them to be normal and social. Like, as an autistic person who's, like, always having to think about, like, how do I want to approach people? Like, I'm always able to reinvent myself. Like, I'm always able, like, I have inborn traits, but I'm also able to, like, intentionally become a certain way, I think, more easily than neurotypical people. I think that neurotypical people, I think it's so interesting, they don't even think about the biggest gift that they have, which is, like, the capacity to just have a personality and not overthink it. Like, they just have the capacity to be who they were born as, and, like, what's that like? Because for me, it's manual. Who I am is manual. Like, I'm literally programming myself, and I think that that's one thing that autistic people and sociopaths have in common. And it's like, I have like a consistent character, not because I am that person, but because I consistently decide that that is the best way to be. And I think that that's really interesting. And she does not have a consistent character because she consistently is, well, she does have a consistent character, but she's consistently deciding that it's okay to be flexible in who she is. Like, it's okay to basically shapeshift. Like, she talks about shapeshifting and the best form to take at certain times and how she feels like she's just a product of her environment. And to be honest, I've tried to do that before and it doesn't work because I do have some like, I have some like stubbornness about like, I do want to be a good person. I do want to be a good person so badly, but like I don't fit into every environment, and it's kind of like also a flex. Like maybe that's what I take for granted about being autistic, is that I want to be a good person. So something I found interesting is that like as I was reading this book and she was talking about her internal world, I was realizing how much I actually got right about some of my friends who have given me like sociopath vibes in the past. Like, she was literally describing almost word for word the way that I had psychoanalyzed someone's behavior. Like, it was crazy. I was like, oh my gosh, wow, like I got that pretty right actually. Like, that person literally just doesn't care about this thing and this thing and this thing, and this thing is a facade. And the reason that they're facading is because this, and it's like, you know, I have a weird spidey sense about people. When I look at them, I just know what they're doing and I know what's up in a way that like, I don't think that neurotypical people do know. I just have like, I feel like it's like X-ray vision, like I can see what's inside. And in a weird way, it is kind of like I'm putting out vibes and I'm getting responses back. And that's like how I know what's inside. It's very difficult to explain, but that's kind of what it feels like. Olive. Speaking of like people who I've met in the past who give me sociopath vibes, or at least are like on the antisocial spectrum, there's this girl who I used to know, and like she told a whole bunch of stories about me that were not true, and that made me look very bad and painted me in a really negative light. And something that this person says in this book is like that she destroyed someone's career because for some reason he thought he should teach the class that he was teaching instead of her, who's the student. So she got like offended that he felt like he should have power over her, basically. And so she twisted a whole bunch of things that he said, and in her mind the justification was, he's already a bad person, might as well like take him down. And like, because he's a bad person, it's okay that I'm taking him down because he's a bad person. And it's like, because she personally felt slighted, she felt okay telling lies about him that made him seem like a terrible person, like much worse than he actually was, because in her brain it was the equivalent. Like, him slighting her was the same as him being a bad person, which is like this black and white thinking, which means you can take him down. You know what I'm saying? And like, that's how I feel like this person was thinking about me. It was like, I didn't want to be your friend, she gave me weird vibes, and then she made up a whole bunch of stories about me because in her brain I had slighted her, which meant she was justified to like take me down because I was a bad person. Do you see? Isn't that just such weird thinking? Like, not being able to like take yourself out of your own personal experience for 2 seconds. To be able to be like, well, that's not how logic works, but okay. At the same time, like, these people tend to think that they are the smartest. And like IQ wise, sometimes they are, but like when it comes to like spiritual and emotional realities, they're almost blind. They're almost blind. Every once in a while, when I'm with someone who has like antisocial traits, they'll have like a bad day, and it'll be like, oh my god, they're having a bad day. And you can see it on their face, they're having a bad day. And then they like lash out at you and treat you badly. And it's like that day they feel so bad, or they don't have enough like energy to put on a facade, and so you get to actually see who they are. Versus when someone who has like a kind personality doesn't feel good, they're not like, sometimes they're screaming at you, very rarely though. They're not usually like screaming at you or treating you badly or using their pain as like a way to justify abusing you. So it's interesting, like when people run out of energy, you get to see the way that they would treat you if you were always seeing their core. When they don't have enough time, energy, or emotional wherewithal, you see their core more clearly because they just simply don't have in that moment what it takes to distribute their energy effectively to enforcing something that is fake, that is a facade, that is meant to deceive you. Deception comes second to survival, and so when people are in survival mode, you see kind of quickly who they are underneath. Something that I thought about while I was reading this book was how, like, every once in a while I'll find myself in a group of people who have like a baseline higher tolerance for like violence, unkind things, or like anger. I have a very low tolerance for anger these days, and I find myself like exiting groups where like violence, dehumanization, or like low like consideration for other people is the norm. The internet has like an even distribution of pro and antisocial people, and you have to remember, like, if people are making mean comments, it's not coming from like necessarily a healthy place. Like, you're just as likely to run into sociopaths in the comments as you are to run into sociopaths in real life. Don't always take comments seriously because sometimes they just come from people who dehumanize other people. You know what I'm saying? Her sense of self is fully formed through other people's reactions. Like when she's alone, she said she feels like nothing. She knows that she exists because of the way that other people react to her. And it's like, she says that the only way that she knows that she's being nice is because other people like respond positively, and the only way that she knows she's being mean is other people are responding poorly. Like, it's not her own internal sense of what's right and wrong that's telling her what's kind and what's unkind, and what will make someone feel good and what makes someone feel not good. It's like she's literally always having to constantly monitor someone's facial expressions to read how what she's doing is tracking with them. She says it takes a lot of work to like read the tone of the room, which I agree with, but I also have like more of an inborn sense of what will make people feel good and what won't. And generally it's like my delivery that's off rather than the content of what I'm saying. And if it is the content that's off, then I usually am just putting truth above someone's feelings, which I personally think is what should be done regularly. This word that she would use all the time in this book is like conviction. And she would say that like regular people who have a sense of right and wrong have like a sense of conviction. And like I will say yes, like when I see things getting hurt, like getting abused, I am like, oh my god, like I can just feel it welling up from inside of me. It's like anger and like direction and determination, and that's what she calls conviction. And it's like, I don't think, because I take it so for granted that that's something that I have in me, I sometimes forget that other people could not have that. And as a matter of fact, some people really just truly don't have that and have never had that. And that the only like sense of direction that they really do have is like what benefits them. It just seems like such a shallow way of existing. It does. Because like, I feel like I have a whole other access from which to experience life because I have like a sense of direction about what is right and what is wrong and what should be done and what shouldn't be done. Okay, so something else that I noticed about this book was that she says she can see someone's insecurities when she meets them right away, and she can see how they're trying to compensate for it. I guess in a weird way, I've always come off as more confident. I have different insecurities than other people. Like, people have very group-based and group thinking based insecurities. And I'm a little bit more immune to those, I think. And if I have learned them, it's been through like programming rather than like an innate agreeance with the group. And I guess I feel like I can see people's insecurities pretty fast. And she talks about how she interacts with people in a way that is like, she uses their insecurities against them. And for me, I feel like when I do notice people's insecurities, which I do very quickly, I don't use them against them. I actually try to protect them. I also try to avoid them because I've learned people respond so horribly when you trigger their insecurities. So we're different in that way. She talks about like how sociopaths see the stick and the carrot, but they just don't care about the stick. And the carrot is like so enticing. And she says like the common view on sociopaths is that they want the carrot so bad that they don't care about the stick, but she says she just doesn't care about the stick at all, that the carrot is like worth it. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, she sees like a prize and she sees that it's connected to something, but she doesn't care about the consequences enough to deter her from the prize. And it's not even that she cares about the prize a lot at all. Like, she really doesn't give a fuck about the prize that much either, but it's a game and she wants to win it because that's what she's doing with her life. And she just doesn't care about the consequences much. It's not that she's like so obsessed with winning, it's that she just doesn't care about the consequences, so winning is easy in her eyes. That's what she described. She enjoys awkward interactions, and so do I, because I'm less sensitive to social norms and less is dangerous. So she was talking about how she like sets up intentionally awkward social interactions and like awkward love triangles because she thinks they're funny. And it's weird because like I definitely experience this. Like, I think it's hilarious when like there's like an awkward group dynamic going on and it's like so visibly uncomfortable for everyone. Like, because I don't pick up on social norms, like those situations are usually just funny to me. I think it's funny that people get so insecure about like whatever it is that people are triggered by. But it's funny to me because I'm not tapped into the social reality. Their social reality is like a group's narrative that they're making up that like, oh, this is painful or oh, this is uncomfortable. And for me, because I'm not tapped into that social reality, I'm like, nah, this is pretty funny, everybody's acting weird. But it's not because I like everybody being uncomfortable, it's because it's just like objectively interesting that people are uncomfortable about something that I can't see or feel. But she talks about how she likes making people uncomfortable and she thinks that's funny and that's different. I don't mind when people are uncomfortable if there's no like real consequences to it. And sometimes I even see that like awkward circumstances can bring groups closer together, and that's part of why I like them. If you make it through an awkward circumstance, the next time it'll be easier and easier. You know what I'm saying? It's like almost group bonding. She says that she feels like she has the capacity to get people to open up, and then she'll use to get what she wants. I know for a fact people open up quickly with me, and I don't understand why. So it's like I'm almost intuitively doing what she's saying that she does purposefully. Like, she says she gets people to open up to her, and I'm like, I don't try, but I do. So we might be doing the same thing, but I don't know what it is. Like, it's like inherent. I think for me, it might be a fawn response. For her, it seems intentional, which is very interesting. I wrote down, people are afraid to say good things about sociopaths, but they're pretty great sometimes. Yeah, that's just kind of what is true. Like, I've had friends who are like seemingly sociopathic and they're funny. Like, they can be really funny and fun to be around because they're so like in tune with other people's experiences and they're so like in the moment. Come. There can be some really intense weird experiences that happen with them, and I enjoy intense weird experiences. So for me, it's like almost fun to be around them. As long as they don't steal your boyfriend, you know? Because they do that. Or as long as they don't steal your identity, because they do that too. Or as long as they, you know, there's pros and cons. Something super interesting that she said was, you can always trust someone to respond to fear. And she says this in the context of being a lawyer, because that's what she is. You can always trust someone to respond to fear. And she talks about like actively and intentionally triggering groupthink and being like, you're a loser if you don't take my side. The only intelligent thing to do is me. And I feel like I'm pretty like good at avoiding peer pressure like that now because of my experience with antisocial people in the past. But there is a time when that might have worked on me when I was like, oh, I want to associate with the winning group. But to me, I just think that that's like a dumb ploy, and I actually think it's unethical that she uses that type of manipulation. But at the same time, she probably wins her cases. But I do think it's interesting she says the only thing you can trust people to respond to is fear, and maybe she's right about that. Maybe I'm missing out on something by not approaching the world like that. Maybe I'm missing out on winning and not approaching the world like that. She sees competition as a way to make herself better, and she sees it as impersonal. And I think that's really interesting because I agree with that in some capacities. I definitely have a tendency to personalize it, but basically like if there's someone who's outdoing you, then it's an opportunity to make yourself better. And I really like that way of thinking. I think it's a very useful and practical way of thinking that will actually make you better. If your goal is to get better, then like seeing competition as a good thing is probably a good thing. Talk about how in law school she saw like people becoming impaired in their capacity to be fair by the law because of mob thinking, because they would get like so personally attached to the outcome of like certain cases. And she would just like step back and see the mob happening where everybody was like, oh, this is such a vile person, like you have to like basically damn them to hell. And she would be like, well, where's the rule that says that? I thought that was interesting. I don't even really have a feeling about it except for that like it's important to note that sociopaths aren't as deeply impacted by mob thinking. In some cases, like in the case of like the witch hunts, that could have actually been beneficial for the people who are being persecuted. In the case of someone being persecuted who is innocent, we can oftentimes have like a bias to judge someone as guilty faster if we don't like the crime that they're being accused of because of our emotions getting in the way. And sociopaths don't experience that. And I think that that's interesting. Like they're less emotionally responsive, so they're more likely to take in information of innocence. If you're innocent, it might be better to have like a sociopathic lawyer on your case because they're not persuaded by emotional thought and by mob thought. Something she said, and this is something I think about all the time, is that the best way that you can get someone to like you is to like them. And that's like basically like ingratiating yourself to someone, like like ass kissing. But it's true, and it has worked as a survival tactic since I was a baby. And also like I've noticed most people it's really not safe to tell your true opinions to, and it takes me a while to like open up to someone about like what I actually think about them and about other things, because most people don't have their own opinion based off of like what their morals are. Most people like people based off of if they like them or like they like people who are like them. And I just think that's weird because like regardless of if someone likes me or doesn't like me, I have a separate opinion about if I like them or not, which I do think is like not a normal way for people to be. But it sounds like she might be like that. I was thinking about how like she explains that she's excited as deadlines approach. I was thinking about how like ADHD people get excited too as deadlines approach, and that's like the only way that they can get things done. But they experience it in a negative way. Like they experience excitement, but it's like over excitement and it's like anxiety. For her, because she's not connected to the anxiety, it's just like she experiences it as like a rush. One of the craziest things about this book was there was like a case study basically that I guess like not a case study, but a story that she told where she was like, oh, I like to like destroy, and there's this girl who I like destroyed. And she talks about how like she could see it in her face that she wanted to be destroyed. And to me it was just like, this was like the clearest moment of like the truth that you can't trust this person, even as a narrator. Like this is not a reliable narrator. Like this book was interesting to read because it's her perspective. It's like good to hear what people have to say about themselves, but then it's also like you have to kind of like weave that in with your own knowledge about someone's personality and the way that they tell stories about themselves and the way that they twist narratives to see themselves in a better light. But yeah, she basically says like, you can see it in someone's eyes that they want to be victimized, and you know that they know what you're doing and all this type of stuff, and it's like you realize in this moment that she actually might have like inaccurate reality testing, because like people don't want to be victimized even if they look susceptible. It's like literally like trauma bonding. Like they're scared of you, they're fawning to you. It's not that they want it, it's that they're scared and they can't help it, and they sense something about you, and they've been victimized before probably too. She talks about how she like manually manufactures her sexuality and like intentionally incorporates women into her sexuality. And it's interesting because like I think that the entirety of my sexuality has been manufactured, and in this way I do relate to her. Like I wasn't initially into like anything, and like everything that I'm into now is because I was open to it and willing to like just experience it and then like kind of like understand what's good about it. And like something I'll do a lot with people when I'm doing things with them is like I'll ask them what it is that they like about this, and then I'll like try to imagine being them, and then I'll start to like it from their perspective. And that's why I feel like I'm non-binary, because I can literally imagine myself as a man doing things with a woman, and like I get like man feelings about women, like, and like every combination of that you could possibly think of, like I can imagine. And a lot of my sexuality is like imagination, like playing pretend and experiencing like other people's feelings through the way that they describe it in my imagination. And so it's like she talks about having a manufactured sexual attraction to women, and how like now it's just as natural to her as if it was like inborn. And I do think that that's interesting, and that's not something that people usually talk about, but like there's a lot of choice involved in my sexuality, and it sounds like in sociopaths' sexuality as well. And she also said that one of the most common traits that sociopaths have in common with each other is queerness. They don't have like a definable sexuality. And yeah, I find myself relating to that a lot. But I also think it's funny that vampires, queerness, and sociopathy are all like tied up together. I also think in general like neurodiverse people tend to share like an openness to different ways of being attracted to other people, just because like they share the fact that they're different with each other as well. You know, like if you're already different, you might as well continue to be different. And so there's like less of a draw to being not different. Like you've already lost the benefit of being homogenous, so you might as well go ahead and gain the benefit of being not homogenous. Something as a side note is that I think that narcissistic people are more likely to be in denial of their sexuality and like defensive about it because they want to hide who they are, whereas like sociopathic people are probably not, and like autistic people are usually not. Narcissism tends to breed like internalized homophobia and like self-hatred. Something crazy about this book is like there's this one empathetic but masochistic person, and she goes on a date with this woman, and this woman like hits her because she mentioned that she was a masochist, and she didn't ask consent before she did it. She just assumed like because this person said she was a masochist, like it's gonna be okay and I'm not gonna get reported. But she literally describes how instead of her logic being, is this gonna be okay with this person? Did I get consent? Her logic is this person gonna report me for this? And I just think that's crazy, because she's like literally she just does not care about the well-being of this other person at all. She only cares about herself and getting reported. And it just reminded me of my ex. It was like, yes, it was a cost-benefit analysis, and that's what kept me safe a lot of the times, is that we have laws to protect victims of domestic violence and like not coercive control, but just domestic violence. And I feel like that is what kept me safe a lot of the times, is that it's not normal to hit people. Like, it's not acceptable, and he like knew that I would have done something about it. I did do something about it. Oh, but it's just so interesting, like the way that she describes it, it's like, you know that she does not care if the other person lives or dies. She just cares that she doesn't get in trouble for it. And she literally says in the book, like, she literally says in the book, like, I would have been okay with killing her if I had been able to get away with it, and if I had been able to like do it again. Like, these were my reasons for wanting her around, was that I wanted to be able to do it more. She's so sick, and reminds me of someone. And she also wanted to not go to jail. It's just crazy. She says that like masochistic but empathetic people can actually benefit from having sociopathic people around, because they enjoy like getting hurt, and she's capable of doing it without feeling remorse. But I would say maybe. And I actually don't really have a decided answer about that. That's still up in the air in my own life. Do I benefit from having sociopathic people around? Sometimes, sometimes I don't. And then always like I make the mistake of believing that they actually are empathetic deep down. That is probably my biggest mistake when it comes to dealing with antisocial people. Because they don't, and they're not. She also talks about how she fell in love with someone because she was really loved by her, and she didn't have to wear a mask with her, and she basically told her like everything about herself and was still loved by this person. But then she saw like this make or break it moment where she was acting sociopathic towards her, and then she was like, are you serious? Like, are you seriously gonna do this to me? And she talks about how she saw in her eyes that she was being judged, like, is this a good or a bad person? And like it was leaning towards bad, and then she realized in that moment that that person was human and that she was gonna have to treat her like human. And it made her love her even more, because she realized like it was a human being, a true human being, who was there putting up with her being a sociopath and like still loved her. Just so interesting. She talks about how crying feels like manipulative to her, and to be honest, like I grew up with a parent who like cried to me a lot when it really was my turn to cry, and it was never okay for me to cry in front of her. And so like I kind of feel that too, like when someone's crying in front of me, it's like I don't always trust it, because my very first experiences of having been cried to was like, it should be me who's crying because you're the one who just literally viciously attacked me, and it's not me crying, it's you crying about your guilt about having hurt me. And so like in a weird way I still experience flashbacks when people are crying, and it's like hard for me to be around people who are crying, not because of them crying, but because I'm not like they're manipulative, they're bad. It's like I am so uncomfortable right now because this reminds me so deeply of something so painful. But it's like it is different. You see, they're different. She thinks people are being manipulative when they cry because she just doesn't understand it. She thinks that the only reason you would cry is to manipulate. I understand that there's lots of reasons that you would cry, and I cry all the time alone. But I also don't understand like coming to someone and like crying and being like, help. It's like, be alone. That's what I did. But I understand that that's not like a healthy way of thinking, and I'm working on it. But I just can't ever imagine myself sitting with someone who's crying and being like comfortable. I really can't, and it really sucks. Unless it's myself. And even then I'm kind of uncomfortable. Something so interesting that she mentions is how Native people with like cold people, they would just like take them off into the corner and kill them. Like when no one was watching, they would get like mysteriously pushed off the cliff. So like Native people had a way of dealing with sociopathic people, and it would be like, oh, you've done this like 5 times, you're gonna fall off a cliff, haha, when we're on a hike, haha. like that was their way of dealing with it. And like to me, I'm not gonna say much about that, okay? I'm not gonna say anything about that. I'm just gonna say that that was their way of dealing with it. And that's illegal now, so. She started talking about like wanting to have kids and like wanting to raise a genius, child, and I just like immediately started to cringe because like of everything that she said. I'm just like, it should not be legal for people like this to have children. Like, it really should not. Like, it really freaks me out, the idea that this person might get stuck with this person as a parent. Like, it's just scary because she enjoys playing with people, and like children are so vulnerable. Like, it's like giving a mouse to a cat and saying, raise it. The instincts of this sociopathic person are gonna kick in at some point, and she's gonna mess with that child. She's not gonna do a good job. That's what I think. But it's also like a human right to have kids these days. That's kind of weird. She talks about how she does this thing in relationships where she manages them, but it's like masking. Like, she has to manage their expectations of her and then like manage herself around them, and it's exhausting. And she says that she has the most respect for the people who she doesn't have to mask around, and who like they adjust their expectations accordingly to who she is, rather than her having to adjust who she is to their expectations. And I think that's really interesting, and I actually really relate to it. And it's like this radical way of approaching relationships where instead of saying like, oh, I'm looking for a boyfriend, fill the role, you say, who are you? What could you be to me, given exactly who you are and what you do and how you act? And then like let me plug you in that way. I think that that's an amazing way of thinking about relationships. And sometimes I just want to do that for the rest of my life. And then sometimes I want to like make up a story in my head and plug someone in where I want them. It's really like just up in the air, undecided. But at the end of the day, I do think it's more realistic to be like, who are you, and like how can I benefit from knowing you, and how can you benefit from knowing me, and can I plug you into my life in a way that is beneficial for both of us? And you do the same, and me like watch very carefully who you are and learn very carefully from what you do. And that's easier for people who like are more conscious, I think, and like it's easier for the group to have like a way of approaching relationships that's good for the group. But for people who are already hyper vigilant and like paying attention to other people and like seeing them without the filters of like what a relationship with someone should be, I think it's easier to like be more creative with how you relate to people. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? In the end, she kept saying like, she came to this conclusion basically at the end that was like, sociopaths deserve human rights and you shouldn't discriminate against them, and I want to be treated equally, I want to be treated fairly, and I'm going to be masked until, like, I'm not saying my name until I know that I'm going to be treated fairly in the society. But what I kept thinking was like, the reason that people treat sociopaths with the caution that they treat them, the reason that sociopaths lose their jobs, the reason that people are hesitant to be friends with sociopaths is because sociopaths are dangerous. As she has revealed in her book, they're dangerous. And like, it's basically a calculated risk to know these people at all in any capacity, and it's something that you can try to do and think that you understand the risks of and still get burned so bad that like basically your stomach turns at the thought of that person ever entering your life again. I think at the end of the day, if you are a sociopath, then you shouldn't expect people to not treat you like one and not distance themselves from you, because it's not within people's capacity to approach relationships with such a level of caution that they can stay safe from someone who like willingly like demises other people. And like, I think it should be okay that people don't want to know sociopaths and don't want to be friends with sociopaths. I think that that's just like, unfortunately, like a part of having realistic expectations of life if you are a sociopath. Like, you aren't entitled to other people's time, forgiveness, any of it. The fact that you have this personality, people can think that they know what they're getting into, and you can think that they understand what they're getting into, and you can think that you're explaining it well, but at the end of the day, like, there are unforeseen circumstances that life brings up, and unforeseen circumstances in the case of sociopathic people means they are out for themselves and themselves alone, and seeing that like in the flesh, it's very different than conceptualizing it before you've seen it. It's so different. It's like you can't even imagine the way that it makes you feel speaking from personal experience, you can't even imagine the way that it makes you feel. It makes you feel like they don't have a soul, honestly. It makes you feel like you're looking at an empty person, like they're just empty, they just don't care about you. It's like such a deep, deep betrayal. It is. And I think like her being at the end of the book like, everybody should just forgive us and move on and la la, and like we can be good people, you can teach us maybe. It's like maybe not. And maybe everybody's just gonna have to come to their own conclusions about what they're willing to do in life and who they're willing to know. Something else I think about is that I think that the point of sociopathy from an evolutionary standpoint is that they kind of like do bring out interesting circumstances in reality, and they like get people thinking about the fringes of reality. Like they prompt a lot of thought, and they prompt a lot of like internal investigation, they prompt a lot of you looking at what's real versus what is not. Like, and they prompt you to realize that reality is fragile, and they prompt you to be grateful for the relationships that you do have where you are cared for. In general, they're just kind of like, they alchemize. Like the presence of sociopaths in society make people realize what it is to be a person. And like in a spiritual way, that's what I think the point of them existing is. Like, and that does strangely like go along with what she was saying about like the devil and being like created from God. Like in a weird way, I kind of agree with what she was saying. Another thing that she mentioned was that companies can be psychopathic in their structure, or like empathetic in their structure. And I've been thinking about like business a lot recently. Just like if I were to create a business, what type of business would I want it to be? And why would I need to separate business from personal life if it's created in an ethical way that would like consider that I have boundaries as a human being, and so does every employee of that business. I've been thinking about like, can I make an empath business? Like a business, instead of like it being like psychopathic in structure, it could be like empathic in structure, like empathic business. Is that possible? It's something I've been thinking about a lot, but she mentioned it in this book and I was like, okay, it's a synchronicity. And then one final thing that she said that I thought was really interesting was that some normal people are bad too, and we need to redefine what we think of as good and bad versus not good and not bad, and like be able to parse out that there's good things about every person. And like some people who are quote unquote bad people have some of the best qualities in certain ways. And it's just like good to be able to learn from all different types of people, all different types of things, and to realize that like people having different perspectives on them makes them good at certain tasks, and that if someone is good at certain tasks, then you can learn from them to do those certain tasks. She says like maybe we need to redefine what it means to be normal. Maybe there's fewer normal people than we think, and then also maybe some of the quote-unquote normal people are actually bad, and more of the normal people are bad than you think as well. Which is like, that's a fair point. But also, I do keep in mind the fact that she said you would literally kill someone if no one would catch you